All right. So, as ever, I'm running monthly webinars, and the purpose of these webinars is to introduce you to some of the tools that we use to help you to grow your business. And specifically today, some of the tools that can help you get more sales conversions. So, I'm not specifically talking about generating leads. And by the way, that was a whole separate session. So that one's been recorded and is on YouTube. That was the one about the most common marketing mistakes that I did a few months ago. But today, I'm focusing on what happens with the leads, with the inquiries that you are generating. How can you get more of those to say yes to you? And what are some of the things that maybe you're missing here? And by the way, that percentage conversion is a figure that you should be measuring in your businesses. So you should know whether that figure is 30% or 4% or 62% or whatever it is. You should know your success rate from lead to conversion. And that's what we're focusing on today. Because, of course, all of you are here because you want to increase that figure, that stat in your business, which will obviously generate more sales. But you want to do that without having to discount. And I will say that again. We want to increase your conversion without having to discount. And I know for some of you, you are going to resist that. And it's usually a significant minority or even a majority of business owners that we talk to who believe with a passion that they need to discount their fees in order to win new work. And they tell us that that's the way it works in their industry, and that their customers, their clients expect it, and it's competitive, and other competitors are undercutting them. So it's what they need to do. And I have just said that is not what you need to do. It is a belief, absolutely. But today, and I'm going to chip away at those of you who do believe that, give me 45 minutes at least to start chipping away at that belief. Because if you hold on to that, you're going to erode your margins. And we've measured this. We've measured this with most of our those we coach are business to business service providers, and we've measured this. We've measured the margins they make on their contracts or their projects, and some of them are profitable, but the ones where they've had to discount often are low margin or zero or even loss making. They've actually lost money because the fee was set too low in the first place. And so it was almost an inevitability from the start. And we hear the justifications for it. Parag, it's tough out there, and maybe winning that kind of work is good for our reputation, it's good for our profile, and all that nonsense. You can't pay wages with a reputation. And I've got to challenge you on this because it's misguided. And you look at the rates of business performance in this country. I talked about it in my last webinar. You all know this. Most businesses, statistically, the vast majority of businesses fail. That is a statistical fact. So if you cling on to that belief, the margins will get eroded. You'll see that in your P&Ls, and ultimately, there's nothing left. And that is why businesses fail in this country. There's no cash left in the business. And part of that is because they keep discounting to win work. And for me, for some businesses, it will be a quick death. For some, it's slow and painful. Either way, the outcome is the same. So I have to challenge those of you who are clinging on to that belief. And as I said, give me the next 43 minutes to chip away at it, because that is my goal today, to see how you can win more work without having to resort to that. Deal? Deal, guys? I really hope so. For your sake. For your sake. So let's first of all pinpoint your frustrations with your sale process, because I'm sure you're all here because you think, well, I want more sales. Yes, but let's get really specific. Where are the frustrations? I want you to sit there and actually write this down. Where specifically in your sales process, when you get an inquiry, can you pinpoint where is the biggest weakness or frustration in that process? Where are you losing people? Where have you tried to improve things, but maybe it just hasn't worked? Getting clear, because you can't just fix sales in 5 minutes. So getting clear on one thing where it's really not working for you would be really useful for all of you. So really have a think. Right, I mean, you're welcome to share in the chat box even, but if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But write it down for yourself. Where is the biggest frustration in your sales process? Get clear, get specific, then you have a chance of actually doing something about it. So I'll just give you 10 seconds just to write that down for yourselves. Okay. So, and I'm sure it might be a significant list for some of you. That's okay, but it's important to get clear on what you're trying to improve. Oh, thank you. Paolo shared his. That's really useful, Paolo. And value proposition. Yeah, very common challenge, Paolo. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Oh, Bogdan as well. Clients say we're the most expensive. Absolutely. I go back to my rallying call 2 minutes ago. Do you really want to be the cheapest? Let's just flip that on its head. Do you really want to be the cheapest? Because if you're the cheapest, unless you've got incredible economies of scale, which most small businesses don't have, unless you've got incredible economies of scale, you're going to go. You cannot survive if you're the cheapest. I really hope I've made that super, super clear today. So let's look up, I'm going to start looking at some of the challenges here. Let's look at a very common challenge, frustration that I see. And that is what happens after you've spoken to an inquiry and it's time to send them your proposal or quote or whatever it is you do in your business, however you do this. You've sent them an outline of how you're going to work together. And obviously that includes the price as well. What happens after you send that? And in fact, a couple of you have mentioned it in the chat box. One of the most common issues we see is nothing happens. It's tumbleweed. It's silence. And you're sitting there going, well, I've built this great rapport with this person. I've met them. We seem to get on. And I even pretended to like their favorite football team and all this stuff. And we were talking for a long time and it seemed to be going so well. And then I've sent them the information that they requested and nothing. What do I do now? It's been 4 days, and then you're in this horrible kind of, I call it the no man's land, where you don't know what you should do at that point. Should you chase them? Should you email them again? Should you call them? But do you not want to do that because maybe they're just busy, or you don't want to come across as pushy, and you're kind of stuck. And you're like, what's gone wrong? What's gone wrong? So that is a very common challenge, guys, and I know a few of you have already mentioned it in the chat, and it's a reflection of, well, it could just be yeah, they are busy, but it could also be a reflection of some of the things I'm going to talk about in terms of your sales process and how you're conducting it. It is a reflection of that and some of the things you might need to fix. So we'll look at that. The other most common outcome that we see is that you do get a response. You do. Hooray. And that response often goes along the lines of, hey, we really enjoyed meeting you. We love what you do. It's fantastic. We'd love to work with you. But then comes the but. But there is someone a little bit cheaper. So we've decided to go with them. What do you do at that point? And I want you again to just stop and reflect exactly what do you do? What do you say? And maybe even how do you feel at that point? Because how you feel is actually quite significant at this point. They raised the price objection. Slapped you in the face with it. You're saying, I sent them this beautiful proposal, Parag. It's 16 pages. It's so well designed. It's got lovely pictures and case studies of the work we've done and the happy clients and even some bios, and we've put the timelines in there. It was a fantastic proposal. I worked 4 hours on that thing, and all I got back was a 2-line response. It's not fair. What do you do next? What do you do next? And how you respond is super important. It's super important. So again, what do most people do? What do most people do? If you want to share what you would do in that situation, you're welcome to. It's energy sucking, Pam. Yes. Yes. Walk away. Walk away is one option. It's not great. You've lost the client. So it's, that's not fun. You've lost the client. Not great. Possibly even worse than that is you don't walk away. And there's this, well, what can we do here? How can we work on the price? Let's see what we can do. I.e., let's start talking about the price and maybe suggesting it comes down. Then there's the slightly defensive response. Oh, well, but did you not understand our proposal? We're so good at what we do, and that competitor, are they really doing all the things that we can do? Let's compare. What's the price difference? And maybe we're not comparing like for like. And this is what I call the pricing cul-de-sac. It's the pricing cul-de-sac. In other words, it's a discussion around the price, the fees. Is the scope of work comparable? Could we cut some of the scope of work? Do we need to cut the fees? And it's a cul-de-sac. Why is it a cul-de-sac? Because it may not be anything to do with price. That's the point to reflect on here. It might be price, but it might be, and often is, something completely different. And the fact is, when you go down the pricing cul-de-sac, you haven't necessarily found out what else might be going on in their heads for them to say no. It might be it's no, not now. It might be actually it's a no because there's something we don't understand about the work you're going to do for us. There's something that's confused us about the work you're going to do for us. There's something that needs more clarification before we can really understand that. But often it's just easier to say no. But it could just be that there's a further discussion needed without going down the route of let's talk about price. And very often you're led down that route, or allowing yourself to be led down that route, without actually exploring what else is going on. And I know that happens because we've seen it with those we coach. I've seen it in my own business. I've been running my own business for 18 years. Of course, we get price objections sometimes as well. And some of the reasons you would not believe. It actually had nothing to do with price. So it's very important to actually understand that the objection is normal. It's to be expected a lot of the time. People don't just say yes like that to investing often significant amounts of money. It's normal. So to expect it and then to know how you're going to respond without just jumping down the pricing cul-de-sac is super important. Super important. Now, so let's talk about what your sales process really is. Because if you want to avoid the tumbleweed, if you want to avoid the pricing objections, you need to understand that the purpose of your process is to build trust with that potential buyer. It is a trust building process. Now, that is why, for example, if you get a referral, that is why it's far easier to convert a referral than it is a non-referred lead, because the trust has already been partially built by the referrer. So it's easier to get a yes from a referral. So therefore, then the question becomes, how do you get more yeses from all of your leads? How do you build a greater level of trust? And I keep using this term sales process, by the way, guys, and I'm making the assumption you have a sales process that you have defined, i.e. the series of steps that you take people through from when that lead or inquiry comes in through to the point of getting the sale. That is a sales process. You should have that defined in your businesses. And the objective of it is to build trust. When trust is high, you are more likely to get a yes. Not when price is low. When trust is high. That's assuming you've built trust. If you don't build the trust, don't expect them to say yes. Expect a price objection. You're literally inviting the price objection. So then how do you build trust? Well, there's some obvious simple ways, of course. There's some obvious ways. And I know many of you are doing this. We know many of you here. Things like testimonials, of course. And written testimonials. But as you know, I'm a big fan of video testimonials as well, because they're more engaging, more human, more emotive. That stuff shouldn't just be sitting on your website. It should be proactively shared in the sales process. The testimonials, the case studies, the reviews. These are essential tools in building trust. And just for fun, actually, guys, but there's an important point here. The vast majority of you are B2B businesses, business to business. And so I think we're playing with a level playing field here. How many reviews have you actually got in your business? So it doesn't matter which platform. It could be Trustpilot, it could be Google reviews or whatever. How many reviews do you actually have? And I just want to share, if you've got more than 10, it'd be really useful to know how many reviews you actually have, and share it in the chat, because I want to make a point to those of you who are not using reviews. Okay, Paolo, very honest, but an obvious improvement area. Info, hello, Info. I don't know who Info is, but 17. Okay. Pam more than 10, Roger 5 on Google. Anyone over 100? Info's John. Oh, John. Oh, sorry, John. Oh, there we are. Gillian, I know you're Zach's colleague, Gillian. So 252. Yes, you're a coffee seller. I know that. So you're slight unfair advantage because your business to consumer. But obviously, you guys understand this because you've got 252 reviews. Chris, 3. Okay, I don't need to say any more, Chris. Ian, I don't need to say any more. Yeah, I mean, if you're less than 10, I would suggest you go and check out how many reviews your competitors have, because that's what your buyers are doing. If you don't think your potential buyers are checking this out, then you're deluded. I'm sorry to be harsh, but I'm not sorry. You are delusional if you don't think your potential buyers are checking this out online. Because wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? And if you've got 5 and another competitor's got 50, there's an immediate level of trust that your competitor has that you don't, even if it's not justified. Oliver, 112. Nice, Oliver. So we've got 2 people over 100. And Oliver, I know you are business to business, so congratulations. You're 12 ahead of us, actually. We're on 100 now. I think the highest I've seen, one of our clients had 350 as a business to business company. But yeah, it's a trust building process. If you've got 3 reviews, you've got to think about the perception that creates in your buyer's mind about your trustworthiness. You may think that's unfair, but that's how trust, it's certainly one of the tools and a big tool. So there's some, I'm going to share some more tips with you, but there's just some, I'm sharing the most simple, basic, practical, obvious ones that I can possibly share. And some of you know you could do better here. I know people don't want to do it and you have to chase them and all that stuff. I know. But understand the impact it has on trust and the trust that's being built compared to your competitors. Now, when we look at sales, I'm talking about this building trust. This can be very challenging to take people through a sales process if you yourself maybe are slightly fearful of sales or uncomfortable with it. I know some people are. They tell us they are. Oh, I don't like being the salesperson. Yet if you're the business owner, you are by default usually the salesperson, the main salesperson in the business. So it's your job, whether you like it or not. If you're the owner or part owner, it's your job. And being fearful, I don't like it. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like going out and doing presentations or pitches or having to justify my fees. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. And that's normal. I mean, I used to be an accountant 18 years ago. I'd never sold anything in my life. And then there I was starting a business with nothing. I had to get pretty comfortable with it pretty quickly. Otherwise, I was gone. How? And I have to share my all-time favorite quote. Some of you would have seen me share this in coaching sessions. My all-time favorite quote on success. I live by this. Don't wish it were easier. And that absolutely applies to sales. Always ask yourself, how can I be better? And my challenge to you is, sales is uncomfortable for many people, but it's also a skill. Sales is actually a learnable skill. Just as your own technical skills you had to learn. Sales is a learnable skill. And I'll just mention this concept here. Any of you read Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers? Because Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hour rule. Now I know those of you read this, slightly controversial rule. So he talked about the factors that led to these outliers in performance, the people who performed at world-class levels. And he talked about certain musicians, classical musicians, popular musicians like the Beatles, and he talked about the 10,000 hour rule. And basically, that most of these people had put in at least 10,000 hours of learning, of practice before they became world class. Even though people saw them and say, "Oh, look at them, they're lucky, they're an overnight success," and actually, the data shows that it wasn't overnight at all. It's 10,000 hours, which equates to roughly a few hours, three or 4 hours a day for 10 years to become world class at anything. Now, that theory's been challenged in many books who say, well, actually, it's not just putting the time in, it's also the conscious focus you put on learning and improvement and deliberate practice. It's not just a function of hours. And absolutely, that's right. But my point here is, whether it's 10,000 hours of learning and practice, or 1,000 or 5,000, how many thousands of hours have you put into learning sales? To the nearest 1,000, guys. My son's doing rounding at school at the moment. He's round, and I'm like, okay, what's 50 hours to the nearest 1,000, boy? Probably zero. Now, you think about your own professional skills, your technical skills. It probably is close to that, or if not I mean, I know I've done 12,000 hours of coaching sessions. Forget learning. I'm over 10,000 hours just of actual delivery. So some of you will be over 10,000 hours in terms of your own professional skills and technical skills. But if you understand that sales is a learnable skill and that to the nearest 1,000, you're zero, perhaps you can start to see that you're going into these sales conversations as an amateur, as somebody who doesn't have the skills. So the chances are you're going to lose. And you're going to blame the client, you're going to blame the industry, and you're going to blame the government. Instead of wishing you were better. So yeah, some of you are doing that. Great. I mean, the resources, and the great thing about this now is learning. The education has become democratized. In fact, it's become it's free. It's abundant. It's a commodity. You don't need us or a specialist person to teach you sales. You just go on the internet. It's all there. It's wonderful. It's a gift. And that's what my coach got me to do when I didn't have a clue about sales. I got to learn it. I read books, and the podcasting didn't even exist in those days. I just read good old-fashioned physical books on sales. And then spread that to YouTube. But the learning has to happen on whatever area, especially when you go back to the frustrations you identified earlier. There is every single weakness and frustration in sales has been documented. It's been shared. How to improve that. It's all out there. Now, one of the things you need to understand in sales is how do people make decisions? How are your potential buyers making decisions about you? And of course, the decision has been made in the brain. There are two sides of the brain. The left side of the brain is responsible for processing practical information, logical information, data, facts, words, numbers. That's our logical left side of the brain. Right side of the brain, more creative, music, pictures, visual. And for most people, one side of the brain tends to dominate. But when you think about this, the left side is logical. The right side tends to be more creative and emotive. I want you to think about which side of the brain do you think dominates, is most dominant when it comes to making decisions. And let me use a simple example. Think about yourselves. Think about the clothes you're wearing today. Think about the food you're eating, or the coffee shop you might have gone to, or the house you're living in. Were those decisions made with the logical part of the brain or the emotive right side of the brain? Which part of your brain made all of those decisions? Because if you want to understand how to make more sales, you've got to understand this. Which side of the brain? If it was logical, we'd all be wearing the same clothes. We'd all be living in the same cheapest part of the houses. We'd all be drinking. None of us would ever buy from a coffee shop, because that's not logical to spend £3.90 on a frappa whatever chino thing. There's no logic whatsoever. Human beings are making 90% of their decisions emotively. Oh, but Parag, that doesn't apply to buying our services. It absolutely applies to your services, because we are human. We can't help it. I haven't got time to go into how, the depth of the neuroscience behind this and the research. You can Google it. We are emotive beings. We will tend to make decisions emotively and then back it up with logic. Oh, well, they've got experience. Oh, yes, the price was reasonable. Oh, yeah, the logical things. But ultimately, crazy things like likability of you rank incredibly highly when it comes to making more sales. That's not logical. But it's been shown, if I don't like you, I'm very unlikely to buy from you, even if you've got the best service and the best offering. Think about how you're making decisions. Maybe this is one thing you need to think more about. I always use the example of my computer, actually. I'm sitting with my trusty old Toshiba laptop. My Toshiba laptop, 300 quid, does the job. My wife goes to me, oh, but Parag, you need to get a better laptop. You need to get an Apple. And I go, well, I don't want an Apple. It's more expensive. And it's a lot more expensive, isn't it? And you Apple users will know that, and you Apple users don't care. And my wife said to me, but you need to get an Apple, and I said, but it's like £2,000. My Toshiba's 350. Why should I get an Apple? And do you know what she said? She said to me, what will your clients think? That was what she said. Purely emotional. No logic. That's not logical. It's not logical to spend 5 times more on an Apple machine than it is on a cheaper competitor that, in essence, does the same thing. But there's emotive factors that Apple have mastered. Absolutely mastered. Yep, I'm having the same conversation with your husband. Apple have mastered it. They understand that they used to sell boxes. They used to sell computers. When they sold computers, they made the biggest loss in corporate American history. That's why Steve Jobs got sacked. It was all logical. Look at our features. Look at all this stuff. Then they started selling emotions, and everything changed because they understood how human beings make decisions. So if you get this, that actually it's primarily emotional, have a think about your sales process. And is the information that you're sharing, that you're communicating, is it focused too heavily on the logical stuff? Features, benefits, specifications, timelines. Yes, that's all important. And yes, of course, people need to understand that stuff. But is the emotional connection happening? Is that part of your sales process? How do I do that, Parag? How do I, what am I meant to do to get this emotional connection? Well, let's talk about the best way of doing that. And so let's think about, you get a new inquiry, a new lead in your business. What do you do next? The inquiry comes in, and what we see happening next, there's a big mistake with what happens next. Need or help. And what most people do is go, hey, let's have a meeting, and let's show you how we can help. Let's show you our portfolio, our case studies, our track record. Let's give you some ideas on how we can help. We've got a lot of experience. Let's help you. Let's share how we can help you. You're being really helpful and losing the sale. Because that poor person that you're talking to is sitting there going, but you haven't found out what I need yet. Ask me about what I need before you can tell me how you can help. It's a great way to build or destroy emotional connection. Jumping, and I've spoken to people who genuinely don't consider themselves the traditional salesperson. No, we're not like that. And what do? They're doing exactly what I've just described because they think they're being helpful. And yet they haven't done the most important thing, which is ask questions. If you want to find out what they need, if you want to build connection, connection is a hormonal thing, by the way. You didn't think you'd be talking about hormones on this call. Oxytocin! Oxytocin is released. The love hormone. It's released when someone feels connected to you. That's pretty important in sales, actually. They need to feel connected. How do you get that? You've got to ask them some questions. The questions can't just be, what's your budget and when do you want to start? If it's all very fact-findy, kind of let's find out about you and your project, and if it's all very logical, you've missed the point of the questions. What you need to be doing is asking open questions. Open questions. What are open questions? What are open questions? Open questions are questions that can't be answered with a yes or no. What, why, how, who, where? How many of those are you using in your sales process when you get a new inquiry? How many of those? 10, 20, they should be written down. You and your teams, for those of you who've got teams and using your teams to help as well, you should know which questions. We've got the same 20, 30 questions that we ask every single person who talks to us. The same 20, 30 questions. It's written down, and they're largely open questions. Because we want to understand what they need first before we can ever offer any kind of help. Imagine going to doctors. You say, doctor, I'm not feeling that well today, and before you said anything, you go, right, yep, I know what's wrong with you. I've seen your this thousands of times. Take a pill and get out. Well, hold on, you haven't found out anything about my symptoms and how I'm feeling. And no, don't bother with that. That's exactly what's happening if you're not asking enough questions. And I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of this, guys. I want you to think about where you've maybe been on the receiving end of this, that whether it's a supplier or someone else trying to sell to you, and they're just telling you how they can help, and they haven't asked you anything. They haven't found out anything about you and what you really want and why. And you're sitting there going, oh, please go away. Or some other negative feeling. Are you making the same mistake with your potential customers? Because there is a resistance. I want to talk about the formula for change before I finish up. There is a resistance to buying from you. Of course, they don't just say yes. Of course, they're going to raise the odd objection or three. There's a resistance. And as human beings, we are resistant to change because it is scary and uncomfortable. And part of that is resisting your service because it's new, it's different. They don't know you. So there's a natural resistance. And this formula is about how you overcome resistance and actually how you overcome it through good questions. And if I use an analogy here, an analogy that almost everyone can relate to, health and fitness. Unfortunately, this country is full of people who want to lose weight or become healthier. And yet, how many of them actually do something about it versus resisting? Most people resist, which is why levels of obesity, for example, just keep going up. You know, they know it's important, they're just resisting it. And the D stands for dissatisfaction, the V stands for vision. And in order to make a change as human beings, there either needs to be a level of dissatisfaction or level of vision. So the dissatisfaction might be, I can't fit in my clothes. I don't like the way I look. I've got heart problems, or levels of dissatisfaction. The vision might be, well, actually, I want to feel a sense of pride. I want to be able to go on the beach. I want to be able to have a smaller waist size, or I just want to sleep properly. And once those factors are tapped into, you're much more likely to overcome the natural resistance that people have to whatever it is whichever service you're selling. So the questions, they can't just be logical surface level questions. The purpose of the sales process when you're asking questions is to use questions to dig deeper into what's really going on. What are their real buying motives? Do you really understand them? Because when you find that out, and you think about what they're going to think about you when you find that out, they're going to be like, why, my goodness, nobody else has ever asked me these questions. Nobody else has understood me like this. I've got a warm, fuzzy feeling about this business. I want to work with you because you're likable, professional, trustworthy. You understand me. You've connected with me. You ask me questions that other people haven't asked. Sure, you might be a bit more expensive, but I want all those things. So it's very important to understand this. And I know I'm just going at the surface level today because that's all I've got time for. But I want you today to think about, as ever with my monthly webinars, what is it you're going to do with this information? Which one action? There was one action. Which one action could you take? You are very welcome to discuss with, oh, Giordano, what does the F stand for? Good point. I skipped the F. First steps. First steps. So you can also showcase what are the first steps that they need to take. So, for example, if somebody wanted to lose weight, the first steps might be some sort of fitness program. R is the resistance, guys. So I want you to think about, before you leave today, I want you to think about what's the one thing you could do from today. I've talked about a number of different, I know we've got different types of businesses on this call. So I've talked about a number of different approaches, some of which will be very relevant to you, some of which might not be. What will you do differently? If you want to talk to me and my team about what you could do or what the options are, great. We always give 30 minutes for those of us who've not spoken with us before. Just email me or message me on LinkedIn if you want 30 minutes with us. But whatever you do something. Do one thing and commit to it. If you want to do more, that's great too. But take the action and get the results. That's what I hope for you today, guys.